Very cool to be here. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Eli Geoffroy. I'm a product manager at Klarna. Before I used to run my own startups. I'm on Switch, a video production company, software and design agency, and I released my own app, which was a very valuable lesson because we spent a lot of effort building something and designing something that no one was waiting for. Besides, I've been involved in projects to get refugees in the Netherlands land programming jobs by training, educating, and eventually employing them. So if you're interested in that, there's a lot of talented refugees that are trying to get their hands dirty. So reach out to me during lunch if you want to know more. So who of you knows Klarna? All right, so who of you have used Klarna? Oh, it's very few. So who of you were satisfied with the experience? I see some hands. The ones that didn't raise their hands, I also want to talk to you during lunch. Let me see if this works the way I think it should. Yes. So Klarna, for those of you who don't know our company, we're a smooth payments provider. So we allow people to check out both online and offline in a smooth way. We were founded in 2005. We have about 2,000 employees, and we have more than 60 million customers. And there should be a sound effect here, but it's not coming. But it was like boom. We have over 100,000 stores. I'll do the sound effect myself. Boom. And one of the most cool things is that we have an ad with Snoop Dogg that you can see in the back. So we are at a point in history where we've never had as much powering technology at our fingertips as today. But despite having faster internet speeds, better and smarter devices, people are just as stressed and even less happy than before, according to the World Happiness Report. So why is this? It's harder for people to solve for the daily time equation. Sorry. The increased connectivity has meant that we've gone from focusing from a few big moments a day to hundreds of micro moments a day that all need planning on, deciding on, and solving for. We have moved from Homo sapiens to Homo taskians, a species suffering from attention deficit and decision fatigue. Consider the behavior of buying a sweater. In years past, you would walk up the main store, see a sweater in the window, maybe go in, try it on, and if you like it, you would buy it with the cash in your pocket. Today, this journey is made up of many, many more microtasks. And this doesn't only go for shopping, but this goes for everything related to our money and purchases. We spend more time administering finances, purchases, issues, etc., and less time than doing what we love. And if you compare the Western journey to, for example, the Chinese journey, we can see that the Western one is much more scattered. So you go for a search, then you go to social media for inspiration, you go to a merchant website, maybe you ask your friends to Messenger or WhatsApp, then you purchase something through a merchant app and actually get your delivery via a different app. That's very scattered and inconvenient. If you look at, for example, Taobao, which is one of the biggest e-commerce platforms in China, you basically open their app, you get personalized content, inspiration just for you, you can have wish lists, you can merchant offers, you can pay with one click, and then you get delivery within the single app, within the same single app. And that's very smooth. They solve for all those micro moments within that single journey. And an even more extreme example is WeChat. So people with WeChat can solve for almost all of their daily behaviors. So if it's shopping, if it's banking, if it's food, if it's social, within one single app, they can almost do everything. And of course, it's a different political situation, and there's a few very big apps that might have to do something with the political situation as well, but that doesn't really matter. If we take a look at the good things, imagine if we could do those in the West. Imagine, for example, that would make you feel like a superhero, right? So I even get the feeling from way simpler stuff. For example, when Uber shows me that a taxi is stuck at a traffic light, that allows me to finish my drink and walk out of the restaurant exactly the moment when the taxi arrives. And that's just a very small example, but it just shows a bit of the line that we're thinking at Klarna. People want a life free from unnecessary complexity. They want a smooth customer experience throughout all these micro moments, just like we saw with the experience in China. And it is no longer enough for businesses to solve for only 1 or 2 micro moments a month. The expectation is for businesses to solve for all these individual micro moments connected to a desired behavior. And I really believe that the winners in our industries will develop platforms that do exactly that. That act like a personal concierge and offer an experience that tailors to a user's life. And you probably feel it coming, or at least I hope you feel it coming. At Klarna, we want to explore the smoothness that we can offer throughout the modern purchase experience. We want to free humanity from all the meaningless time and frustration spent on money and purchases, so people can do more of what they love. Our personal buying assistant will make it easier for you to save, pay, shop, track, return, and a lot of other things, so you can do, as I said, more of what you love. So let's take a look at Klarna Shopping, which is a product that I'm one of the product managers for, and take a quick tour of how we've been trying to test our way towards great UX. So when I was thinking about this presentation, I just went over like all of the things that we're trying to do at Klarna, basically to get this great customer experience. And actually what's very interesting is that all of the things I worked on always started with a legit user need. So that's also how Klarna Shopping started. And this might seem very obvious, but people often forget to take a step back and ask themselves what the problem they are solving for. And then it gets very difficult to measure success. So the need that we were solving with Klarna was that people were paying with Klarna and loving it. But if a store wouldn't have Klarna, they wouldn't be able to pay with us. So then they had another not so frictionless micro moment to solve for. So then we came up with an idea. What if we could make Klarna available everywhere? And then literally everywhere. So regardless of a store integrating with us or not. And that's a pretty bold idea. And the excitement in the room when that idea came up was pretty good. So I've heard, because I wasn't there yet. So when I came in, we started building our own in-app browser that people could use to pay with Klarna everywhere, even at stores that don't have Klarna. So as you can see here in the screen, you have like our own store index, and you can slice it in 4 everywhere, which basically means that you can pay in 4 installments. And what's interesting about that is that we will never charge you any interest with this product. So even if you pay in installments, we won't charge you interest because that's a bank thing. So when you get to the checkout from our app, you click Pay with Klarna, and we then basically automate the whole checkout experiences for you. So we fill out your details, and you get all of the other benefits of paying with Klarna. And that's, I think, pretty cool. But as soon as we started building that experience, we realized that there were many more micro moments that needed solving for. The experience that came before checking out, which was the thing that we were good at, had many more issues than only the payment. So we really wanted to do more, and that means basically going from the scattered experience on the left to the more integrated experience where people could basically start their shopping journey and end their journey with us. So they could save time, money, and have a more smooth and fun shopping experience. So how are we trying to build these experiences? So when I was thinking about this presentation and thinking about what I wanted to share with you, I thought of this term that I think that describes it best. Let me introduce you to minimum viable everything. This is at the core of how we work. So we constantly try to maximize learning whilst minimizing effort, and that throughout all competencies. This we could do by doing a user interview, a guerrilla test, an A/B test. It doesn't matter. It's all about gathering data to get insight and iterate on the product. A thing that is falling from my jeans. I'll hold it in my hand. So minimum viable everything requires a specific mindset. It's about... Hello? Maybe I've turned it off. Hello? All right, I'll just keep talking until someone comes and helps me. So can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
This is a very good example, actually. Oh, am I back on again? No? But this is a good example. So we need to be scrappy, right? This is also a specific mindset. So if you break stuff, we just continue and try to do it better next time. And that is what minimum viable everything is. So it's a mindset that basically is about learning fast, doing so in a smart way, and doing that like a startup, which is aligned with the operating model that Klarna runs, in which teams act like startups with full ownership over their own problem space. If we want to work with this minimum viable everything approach, this also requires for close collaboration. And I've seen teams, and I think this is something that you've mentioned as well, where product would come up with something, pass it to design, and then pass it to the engineers to be built. But if we want to continuously improve our product based on our findings, everyone needs to be involved. So a constant iterative cycle between product engineering and design really is a must if we want to do this. So we all know the minimum viable product, right? What is the simplest thing we can do, or the simplest thing we can show to customers to get most learning? And that could be scrapping something from our MVP to increase velocity, or it could be simply customer interviews. So when we started building that extended experience before checking out with us, we just started by interviewing users and asked them 3 things: what they were trying to get done and why, how they were doing this, and what they could do better, or what could be better in that experience. And we found that they were indeed very frustrated with their online shopping journey. They didn't find the right items, they couldn't keep track of the items they liked. So we saw that there was an opportunity for us, which was a very simple insight, something we kind of already knew, but we had now some validation that we could work with. So then we came up with a product we thought that could help the users keeping track of the items they liked. So we came up with the idea of a universal Klarna wishlist. We quickly defined our MVP and started building something, because the best validation is through bringing products to market fast. And this might seem obvious, but believe me, I've seen people that say this, but actually never dare to do this. And what helps me in defining my MVP is asking myself this question: if I had a meeting with my investor coming up, what would I scrap from my MVP to be able to actually show something to him? And that's something we asked ourselves, so we came up with our MVP for the universal Klarna wishlist, which basically only allowed people to add something to their wishlist by tapping that button from the Klarna app, and then it would show up in their wishlist. And actually, we saw people were starting using it, and pretty quickly as well. And that was surprising, because people even started using the wishlist independently of our payment product. So we now validated that there was an actual need we were fulfilling with building a relatively simple product. And people will use your product differently. Find out why, because it's an opportunity. So when we launched our MVP, we also saw that people were not only using it for listing items, but also for bookmarking stores, which is something, well, we thought of before, but that was now something we would probably build earlier based on this insight. So the minimum viable everything approach also asks for an effort from design. They should, within that close collaboration cycle, ask themselves, what is the minimum viable design? And if a minimum viable product is expressed through a design that is stripped down, will it sufficiently yield the insights that are needed? So what we try to do when coming up with the minimum viable design is we start with the data on the horizon, and we create the coolest design we can come up with. And that we strip down to our MVD. So this gives us both something to work towards to, and allows us to get feedback from users quickly by stripping down things we don't deem absolutely necessary. And when we strip those things away, we need to be able to explain why. So this could be either based on data that we have gathered, and specifically data that we have gathered, because if we get something from the internet where a guy, for example, says blue works better than green, it's probably not going to be as applicable to us, and that guy has probably done his experiments in a way different context. So we try to base those decisions based on our data, and if we don't have that, we try to base it on well-elaborated argumentation. What I've seen a lot, and I think this is something that product managers maybe do more often than designers, is they say, yeah, I like this design because it's very clean, but that doesn't explain anything. So what you want to do is Design X is good because it attracts the user to the core action. Or design Y is good because it's consistent. Anyway, just two examples to explain you a bit how we go over the minimum viable design. And this is something that really will help you to get user feedback quickly, stripping that design down. For example, by using guerrilla testing. So who of you is familiar with guerrilla testing? Awesome. So who of you has actually done it? Who of you has done it in the last month? All right, still some people, but not all of you. And that's the problem, because I really believe in guerrilla testing early and often. But for those of you who weren't familiar with the term, guerrilla testing is the art of getting people in cafes or public spaces to try out your product whilst observing and or recording them, basically to get feedback. And I really love guerrilla testing, and I try to do it in every phase of the development cycle. Let's say we see somewhere in our flow or in our analytics that people somewhere in the flow drop off. Then a guerrilla test is a very easy way to basically find out the why belonging to the what. And the cool thing about guerrilla testing is that you can do it with basically everything, right? So you could do it with a concept drawn on the back of a napkin to fully functioning prototypes. And yes, results will be a bit more shallow. And yes, you will need to prepare well anyway, and you will be less specific in who to target. But just imagine that we've built this entire flow, which is, you maybe can see it from the screen, but it's a pretty complex flow technically. And we would have user tested this in a lab setting professionally in Germany, which is a pretty tough market because there's people still using fax. And imagine no one would have understood a damn thing. And we were actually adding microsteps unnecessarily to that user journey. And I'm not saying that this actually happened and that we were sitting there in Germany while no one understood anything. But a 1-hour guerrilla test would have saved us much hassle in such a case. And okay, so it actually did happen, but we had to build the flow anyway because we needed to validate technically that this would work. Anyway, guerrilla test early and often is my advice. So minimum viable everything goes for engineers and our code too. So what we should ask ourselves, how can we reduce time to market without building too shitty code? Let's say we wanted to do an A/B test. If we were going to do an A/B test, it doesn't make sense to build out both A and B, right? Because we're going to throw away either A or B and maybe both anyway. So at this point, we should really take shortcuts as long as it's still working for the user. And this is especially important because if you could take into account that all of us are wrong most of the time, it really doesn't make sense to start completely building out your product if you didn't prove your hypothesis yet. And if you do an A/B test, chances are very high you're going to disprove your hypothesis. If you want to increase likelihood of being right, go for your best bet instead of your guess. Do your research before you A/B test. If you base your hypothesis based on insights you've gathered before, maybe user interviews, guerrilla tests, or whatever, you will have a best bet of what works, which is clearly better than a guess. And now we're talking about A/B testing, test everything. So I've seen teams that only test the most obvious pages, such as, for example, a landing page, but you can really make impact everywhere in the flow, right? So that's one. And two, even if your whole team thinks something is an improvement, as I said before, you're probably going to be wrong. So test it. If we look at this screen specifically, we were going to introduce this screen, and basically we wanted to make sure people would click more. And everyone in my team thought it would be an improvement. And one of my coworkers, he was supposed to be here, but he's not. He really tried to push me into just launching this. And you probably expect what's going to happen, right? So I didn't follow up, I didn't listen to him, and we actually did the A/B test. And people actually were clicking more, but then get stuck later in the flow. So it wasn't a real improvement. And we wouldn't have found out if we wouldn't have A/B tested it. So test everything. And of course, A/B testing also has its limitations, right? So even if you have a best bet, it's still going to be a best bet. or a bet, and you're only able to come up with a specific amount of solutions, and you're only able to come up with, test a specific amount of solutions as well. So I'm going to take off my Klarna hat now and put on my personal one, just to tell you a bit about a project I've been working on. So to address the limitations A/B testing has, a while back I've been working on automating A/B testing by using a genetic algorithm. And a genetic algorithm, you don't need to understand everything about it, but basically what it does, it takes aspects of evolution. So say we wanted to optimize for signups on a specific page. What we would do is we would start with a population that would exist of elements that would have traits, like for example, fonts, shapes, etc. And then what the algorithm would do, it would evaluate all traits of this population and would evaluate which traits were working and would take that to the next generation. So every generation would then be an improved version. And this is interesting because now we would have an algorithm that would automatically, 24 hours, optimize for that specific goal. So we could allow we could test many more variations. And this is really a paradigm shift, I would say. Because normally you have data to validate your assumptions, and now you turn that around. So now the algorithm uses many data points, evaluates the results, and you just validate the outcome of that data. And this is very interesting, and this is just like my personal sneak peek of what the future may or may not bring. And I thought since we're talking A/B testing so much, I might as well include this example. All right, so let me put on my clown hat again. So we have been trying to maximizing learning whilst minimizing effort with a minimum viable efforting approach, so we can take away the microtasks for our users. So we have MVPs, MVDs, MVCs, and within that I described just a few tools that we use, like user interviews, guerrilla testing, and A/B testing. But obviously this is just a few examples, and it's always going to be dependent on you and your team and the context and the situation that you're dealing with, whether or not it works for you. And I would be very, very interested to enter this discussion with you during lunch to see whatever has worked best for you. So with shopping, we started our journey with paying at any store. We augmented that with a universal wish list, and now we have like price up notifications and all of other sorts of cool features. And we're going to come to the UK soon as well, so please try it out. So before I wrap up, who of you liked my presentation? Who of you has learned something or was reminded of something they already knew? Who of you would have wanted me to just play the ad with Snoop Dogg? Oh shit, that was, I wanted to say something else first. Blew my own outro. Anyway, before I dive into that, about that with Snoop Dogg, we must do a great job, right? So we have all these cool features, but we really must do a great job because it's going to be the companies that will be able to iterate quickly and take away those microtasks with platforms that will offer a concierge experience that will be the winners in Fintech and any other tech for that matter. And now I wanted to ask you who would have wanted me to show the app with Snoop Dogg, and then would have said, okay, so no one, and this was like my first easy validation about whether or not I've done a good job. But that was it. So get out there, take away those microtasks and test it out of everything. Thank you very much.